Welcome to Best Practices for Social Media and Communications. I'm Amy Cam, and I'm the outgoing Vice President of Communications for First District PTA. Here's a quick overview of what we'll be covering in today's workshop. We'll be talking about how to choose the best communications channels for your PTA. We will cover some best practices for communications in general and specifically for social media. We'll also be talking about some tools to make your social media posts engaging and take a quick look at the social media kits from California State PTA. We will also touch on how to keep your PTA social media and communications accounts secure and finish with a live question and answer session after the presentation. A few things that we won't be covering today include how to set up your social media accounts from scratch. If you need help with that kind of task, we can help you offline, so contact us later. We also won't be covering social media analytics or other higher level functions normally associated with communications work in the digital world. This slide contains links to a variety of PTA resources for communications leaders. The links are clickable in the digital PDF handout for this workshop. PTAs are encouraged to communicate with PTA members, the school community, and the community at large to inform them about PTA activities and initiatives. We can also communicate a broader message about the value of PTA. So how do you decide which communications channels are best for your PTA to accomplish these goals? When deciding which communication method to use, each PTA must determine what will best meet the needs of its members and its community, and what will fit within its budget. This slide lists several of the most common methods PTAs use to get the word out. There are a few things to consider when selecting the best way to inform the community about your PTA. Identify your target audience. It's important to clarify who you want to reach so you can tailor your message to that audience. Choose the right tool. Decide how to best communicate with your audience. Consider using multiple tools to carry your message. Choose platforms you're familiar with. Start small. You don't have to launch a website, create a Facebook page, open a Twitter account, and send an email newsletter all at the same time. Start where you feel your message will reach the most people. Start somewhere. Sometimes we forget to brag about the work that our PTA is doing. It's so important to connect with the families at your school to let them know what amazing things your PTA is doing for kids. So let's take a moment to think about who it is you're trying to reach through your communications. Consider the following questions. Who does your PTA want to talk to? Who do you want to see your messages? What platforms do members of your target audience use? Consider a communication surveys to ask what platforms your audience uses most. What about your non-members, like the school community outside of PTA? Consider who's going to manage your communications. Managing several social media accounts at once can be challenging. Not only is there content to create and post, but someone will also have to monitor the accounts for activity and interact with users. Do your communications volunteers have time for 2 or 3 channels? Knowing who your audience is means that you can adapt the content of your writing to address the main concerns of your audience. For PTAs, this might mean that a post created for teachers won't necessarily look or sound the same as a post created for students or for parents. Now that you've taken some time to think about who your audience is and how you might want to reach them, let's look at some specific social media channels to consider. Let's talk about the 3 most popular platforms: Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. First up is Facebook. Facebook provides access to the broadest audience, parents of all ages, students, staff, school districts, etc., though the demographics of Facebook users do tend to skew older. Facebook is a good place to post links, images, and videos. It's easy to share information from other sources on Facebook, and PTAs without websites will often use Facebook as their online information hub. Facebook still has the largest user base of any social media platform in the world. Twitter is where PTA can engage with other organizations, businesses, elected officials, school districts, county offices of education, state agencies, the press, and more. You can use hashtags to sort and find information on Twitter. It's very easy to retweet from other sources. Interestingly, the majority of Twitter users are male. So if you have a goal to increase your male participation at your PTA, this is a great place to reach that audience. Instagram is image heavy. Posting pictures here is best. You can also post simple graphic images. This is also where our younger members hang out, and it's a good place to reach student members. Interestingly, the majority of Instagram users are female. Keep that in mind when creating content on this channel. Over the next several slides, we will review some best practices for your social media accounts. Each PTA should have its own social media accounts. The most common reason we hear for PTAs not having their own accounts is that they are using the school's accounts. Collaboration with your school is important, but you're limited by what your PTA can communicate on the school accounts. It can also sometimes take longer to post information because you're waiting on school staff to do it for you. There might be restrictions on how much information you can share, often resulting in very limited unit, council, district, or state PTA messaging. Interaction and engagement on school-owned social media tends to be with the school and district staff, not with your PTA members and PTA leaders. Schools are limited by law on the kinds of advocacy they can promote. This can limit how you keep your members informed about the work that PTA is doing and how your members can play a part. It almost goes without saying that your PTA social media and communications accounts should be secure and well protected. Treat your PTA accounts like you would your own bank account. Limit who has access and change passwords frequently. Review who can access your accounts at least annually and remove individuals who are no longer serving on your PTA board. Your PTA accounts should be owned by a master email address like abcpta@someemail.com. Free email account providers such as Gmail are fine for this purpose. Understand that if you choose to use two-factor authentication for the primary email, it's often tied to a single phone number. As a workaround, you can set up a Google Voice number for this purpose. Set random unique passwords for each of your PTA communications accounts. There are online password managers such as Dashlane, 1Password, and LastPass to help you keep track of multiple passwords. Many PTAs have a dedicated person who's responsible for managing the social media accounts, such as a vice president or chair of communications. My guess is most of you are that person, and that's why you're here. Still, it's important to designate PTA board members and volunteers who are willing to help you monitor your social media accounts. We recommend at least 3 PTA members be dedicated to responding to comments and direct messages on social media. These individuals can be part of your communications committee or just provide occasional backup for the communications chair. These volunteers should be regular users of the social media channel or platform they are monitoring. The president or executive vice president are often part of the communications team, but if they aren't regular users of social media themselves, they won't provide great support. Consider asking members who provide regular content for your communications to help out, such as the vice presidents or chairs of legislation and advocacy, programs, education, family engagement, and fundraising. We are also seeing corresponding secretaries picking up social media duties. Lastly, don't forget to ask students if you're a PTSA and men to lend a hand. Setting posting guidelines and displaying them on your social media accounts can help if at any time you feel it's necessary to delete a comment or post. This slide contains a list of suggested posting guidelines from the California State PTA. These can be posted on any PTA platform that allows comments or posts from the public. Your PTA social media sites are controlled by your local PTA. You are not required to post items from outside of PTA or even to keep any items that others post on your accounts. All PTA social media posts must be respectful, truthful, discreet, and responsible. Posts must be non-commercial, non-sectarian, and non-partisan according to PTA policies. Inappropriate or off-topic comments should be deleted. The PTA can decide to delete any comment or post it chooses. Negative comments are an inevitable part of social media. To be successful on social media, you have to be willing to take the good with the bad and recognize that you cannot control what other users say. You can only control how you react and what you post. In many cases, a post that you find disagreeable or contrary to your own opinion may not provide grounds for deletion. If you delete every post that you find objectionable, you may escalate the problem or alienate users on your page. Grounds for deleting a post include the use of profanity or derogatory language, personal insults or disrespectful language against another user, or spam or overly solicitous content. For other negative comments, it's best to respond in a respectful way and provide accurate information to support your position. Remain calm and refrain from sharp, heated posts. Encourage leaders from your executive board to chime in from their personal accounts in support of PTA positions. Make it a conversation and flood your feed with the positive. For most other comments, especially those that are of a customer service nature, the best solution is to guide the conversation away from your page by having the user contact you directly via in-channel direct message or email. A quick word about getting your content approved for social media and other communications. PTA social media sites, including websites, are owned and administered by the PTA, not the school. Therefore, the principal's approval is not needed for posts. But remember, any PTA material that is passed out on school property or posted on school websites or school social media accounts do need the approval of the principal as well as the PTA president. Plan accordingly, as it can take time to get the approval you need from the principal. Over the next several slides, we will review some best practices for creating content for social media, although many of the recommendations can apply to other forms of communication as well. As I mentioned earlier, we will not be going into detail about how to create new social media accounts or how to set up a website. If you have questions about this process, you can contact First District PTA for support. So, Facebook has the most flexibility when it comes to image size. You can use square, landscape, or portrait images, and Facebook can handle all of it. You also have the most amount of space for your messaging on Facebook. There are no character limits for Facebook posts. On Facebook, we recommend that you post at least once a week to start and work your way up to 2 or 3 times per week. That might seem like a lot, but California State PTA posts every day. If you just share half of their posts, you can fill your feed in no time. Keep your posts to 2 short paragraphs maximum. Don't use hashtags on Facebook because they do not provide added benefit. This slide also contains some suggestions for things you can post. The Facebook Events feature is a great way to get word out about your association meetings, upcoming PTA events and activities, and you can even link to outside ticketing resources like Eventbrite. Twitter is not known for being image heavy, but you can certainly post images, and many organizations will use images on Twitter to get around the 280 character limit or to draw attention to a certain tweet. Like all of the platforms we're discussing today, consistency is key for Twitter. Post 3 to 4 times a week to start and work your way up to 2 posts a day. California State PTA's Twitter account gets the most traffic Monday through Saturday, so keep this in mind when scheduling your own posts. Twitter makes it easy to retweet and comment. California State PTA tweets every day, several times a day, so sharing state and national PTA content will help keep your Twitter feed engaging. Tweets must be 280 characters or less, including spaces and punctuation. This limit gets used up quickly, although Twitter does shorten hyperlinks automatically to reduce character count. Hashtags are an integral part of the Twitter platform. Always use the hashtag PTA for Kids. It's part of the California State PTA brand, and it makes it easier for State PTA Communications Commissions members to find your tweets and like them, comment, and retweet them. If you get creative and make up a hashtag, be sure to do a quick search because you never know who else is using that combination of words. It is a global platform after all. Instagram is an image-driven platform. Eye-catching photos or graphics that convey your message should be your focus for content on Instagram. On Instagram, we recommend that you post once a week to start and work your way up to 2 or 3 times a week. Keep your captions or text to just a few sentences, and make sure you lead with the main point. Instagram does cut the caption after a few lines, sometimes after only 1 line on mobile devices. Use hashtags on Instagram. The more popular the hashtag, the more likely your post will be found. You can use up to 30 hashtags on a single Instagram post. One thing about Instagram is that it does not allow you to include clickable links in the description of the image. This is why you will often see posts that say link in bio. In your Instagram bio, you're allowed to have one link. Some organizations will use Linktree or another service, but if you have a website, you can link directly to your website within your Instagram bio. Now we're going to dial down on a few tips that are universal for all social media graphics. These include keeping the text legible, using visual hierarchy in your graphics, using color to convey feeling, using typography to create mood, and being conscious of image size. Even if you're not a professional graphic artist, you can probably tell that these sample images are examples of what not to do when creating visual content for your social media channels. There is a lot going on in each of these images, so much so that your eyes might be having trouble figuring out where to land. You're probably trying to read the fine print and struggling. Can you tell who or what is being promoted in these images? The center image, for instance, says fundraiser right in the middle, but what is the fundraiser for? Who or what is being supported? It's almost impossible to tell. So let's take a look at tips of how to avoid making these same mistakes when creating graphics for your PTA. The most important principle of good design is so obvious that it's easy to take for granted. Make sure your text is easy to read. The top line on this slide actually says, avoid hard-to-read typefaces in an incredibly hard-to-read typeface. Don't overdo it with fancy fonts that are hard to read. They look great, but you won't get your message across. Use appropriate text size. Keep in mind that a large portion of your audience will be viewing your graphics on their phones, so make sure your text on your graphics is large enough to read. Be aware of color contrast. Steer clear of color combinations that create what is known as visual vibrations, which is when colors don't contrast enough and appear to bleed into one another. Limit the number of fonts that you're using to no more than 2, maximum 3 per image or publication, such as your newsletter. When you use too many fonts, they compete with each other to grab the reader's attention. When creating graphics for social media where skimming is standard, grabbing a reader's attention is key. Visual hierarchy is the use of design elements like color, type size, and type positioning to convey the relative importance of information. It provides order and helps readers prioritize and comprehend information more quickly. By giving different pieces of information different visual weight and by strategically organizing how you group and position your information, you can elevate and reinforce key points and make your messages more effective, efficient, and engaging. Color is an invaluable tool for creating exciting and engaging graphics, but it's important to be aware of how certain colors or color combinations influence perception. Some colors, such as those in the red and yellow families, can stimulate and energize, while others, such as those in the blue spectrum, can convey calm and trustworthiness. As a starting place, National PTA provides a visual identity standards handout that includes the official PTA brand colors and their digital codes. This handout is included in the materials provided with this training. Much like color, typography conveys mood and tone, sometimes more powerfully than the copy it delivers. When choosing a font, think about the desired tone of your words. Notice the way the samples on this slide miss the mark with tone. Some of your copy may be intended as more humorous, some more serious. Again, limit the number of fonts used. You don't want your graphic to look like a ransom note. Know where you have room for expressive flourishes with your typeface and where you'd like your font to be more neutral. It's important to think about where your images will be posted so that you can tailor your graphics to the sizes and preferences of each platform. Image size guides are available with a simple search online. Be sure to use a current size chart like this one, as image sizes do change somewhat frequently. Now that we've gone through some tips for creating images, it's your turn to go out there and get started. Here's a list of some great free and inexpensive tools to help you. Canva is a very popular tool for PTAs. I know a lot of PTA users that are very familiar with this platform already, but what you might not know is that their premium services are free for nonprofits. All you have to do is apply. You can find more information at the link on this slide. We also have provided a helpful nonprofit application guide in the workshop handouts. As we communicate the PTA message, we build identity, increase recognition for PTA, and advance the work of PTA in our community and throughout the state and the nation. This part of the presentation will address PTA messaging and branding that will help you meet your communication goals successfully. In addition to promoting the mission and goals of PTA as an organization, the primary purpose of PTA communications is to keep PTA members and your school community informed about the work that your PTA is doing and how they can play a part in supporting your events, activities, fundraisers, and of course, promoting the importance of PTA membership. PTA enjoys excellent name recognition with the public. However, it is important to remember that the local community may not be familiar with the actual function of PTA. Market your PTA. Publicize special programs and events. Remind your community that PTA connects schools and families, and that PTA speaks for all children with one voice. Report what the PTA has done for children and families at your school. Lastly, don't forget about working with the media. Contact your local newspaper and radio and television stations and ask them to cover PTA events and programs. Then be sure to share that media coverage on your PTA social media and other communications channels. PTA officers represent their unit, council, or district PTA. PTA is a diverse organization and its leaders speak with one voice on behalf of all children. Presidents are the official representatives of their PTAs and may appoint others to officially represent the organization as needed. Know, understand, and reflect official PTA positions. Do not commit your PTA association to programs, projects, or positions the association has not voted to authorize. Build credibility as an individual so that your comments are of value to the audience. And remember, do not mix personal and PTA opinions while representing PTA. When talking about PTA, especially to new audiences, it helps to give a brief overview to show the scope and strength of PTA. This slide shows some common talking points to consider. The more these messages are said, the more likely it is the messages will be heard and repeated. These talking points are only intended as guidelines for communicating on behalf of PTA. Personalizing your talking points helps people connect to the message. Share your personal PTA experience. Why are you dedicated to the work of PTA? How did you first get involved? What are the areas that need improvement in your school or in your community? Ask yourself if your message is concise and compelling. Here are a few more tips for improving the content of all of your PTA communications. Don't be afraid to ask for feedback. Use an opinion poll, a questionnaire, or interactive questions on social media to get a feel for how your communications are being received by your audiences. Publicize upcoming PTA events, the results of past events and past fundraisers, your PTA membership campaign, awards your PTA or PTA members have received, and of course brag about all of the great things your PTA is doing for your school and students. Remember, people don't read, they skim. So use bullet points, quotes, charts, and graphics to catch the eye of your readers. Proofread everything. Poor grammar, misspellings, and inconsistencies reflect poorly on an organization. An association that advocates for children, particularly their education, should be a strong proponent of consistent style. Have 2 to 3 people proofread everything before it is distributed. And lastly, understand copyright laws. PTA must abide by federal copyright laws governing printed matter, poetry, art, music, and computer software. Republish art, articles, photographs, etc., abiding by all laws and in an ethical manner. Give credit where credit is due. For complete copyright information, go to copyright.gov. The link is also in your workshop materials. Communication is a critical tool in enhancing diversity, equity, and inclusion at your school and in your PTA. Part of the work in building an inclusive community includes making sure that your PTA communications reach as many people as possible in a language that they can understand. To that end, PTAs should work closely with the school to meet the language needs of those who receive PTA publications. Here are a few things to consider. To translate information and materials, seek help from bilingual parents on your PTA Executive Board, teachers or support personnel in the classrooms or the school district, or even foreign language departments at local high schools, community colleges, and universities. Consider providing translated content in multiple formats. Perhaps presenting side-by-side translations of articles, or printing or posting translated content separately would work. Offer information in English with short recaps of major information in other languages. Have a bilingual point person who you can reach out to, or a web page with information available in each target language. Develop audio or video of newsletters, notices, and parenting tips in different languages and post them on your website. No matter who you're writing for or in what language, avoid using acronyms and language that are very specific to PTA and public education, such as LCAP, LCFF, CDE, HSA, and so on. It's okay to talk about these topics, of course, but don't assume that your audience knows what these terms and abbreviations mean. Spell out the abbreviated words first, then switch to the abbreviation if needed. The California State PTA offers outreach translation grants to units, councils, and district PTAs for written or verbal translation of PTA materials into other languages. For more information about the outreach translation grants, visit capta.org. One of the easiest ways to create content for your communications is to share from PTA-safe sources. Communications and social media posts should be PTA related and approved. This slide features a handy table to help you determine what is safe, what you should research further and get approval on, and what you should never post. This chart can be found in the handouts for this workshop. You can always share content from National PTA, California State PTA, First District PTA, and your Council PTA if you have one. You can also share information from the State or County Office of Education, your school district, your school, and Ed 100. Highlighting special events, programs, grants, school deadlines, school site sister organizations such as your Educational Foundation, Boosters, ASB, etc. is okay, but not mandatory. PTA messaging should come first. The yellow list is content that could be of interest to your PTA community, but do use caution when considering information from these sources, and be sure to get approval before sharing. The red list includes content you should never post on PTA social media accounts, PTA websites, or other PTA-connected communications methods. Review the PTA non-commercial, non-sectarian, and non-partisan policies for more information. I want to take a minute to talk about PTA guidelines for the proper use of PTA name, PTA logo, and tagline, Every Child, One Voice. While PTA has become a part of American vocabulary in the same way that people might call any soft drink Coke or any facial tissue Kleenex, the name is protected with a number of federal trademarks and has been for over 100 years. The success of the PTA brand identity system depends on all PTAs following the established brand guidelines. When used properly, PTA's logo and tagline create a consistent message, helps unify all PTAs, and sets PTA apart from the competition. In order to maintain a greater level of consistency, the PTA logo should only be reproduced from approved digital files and should never be altered or distorted in any way. The PTA Typography Guide provides a list of PTA branded fonts and how to use them. PTA also has a palette of approved colors that provide brand recognition when used together. In fact, this presentation was created using PTA fonts, colors, and the official PTA logo. As mentioned, all of the California State PTA social media platforms post information that can be shared to your PTA accounts. California State PTA also provides additional content with their social media kits. These kits include images and text that you can easily customize and post on your personal and PTA social media accounts. The State PTA social media kits include templates for Canva to make customizing the graphics even easier. Join California State PTA for their monthly social media kit reveals for live demonstrations and Q&A sessions. Scan the QR code from your phone's camera or visit the Social Media Kit webpage on the California State PTA website for more information. Photos and videos convey the excitement of a school carnival or the size of a crowd at a town hall meeting like nothing else. They add tremendous visual interest to any form of communication your PTA might create, and they can be great to share with your local media. However, in the digital age where a picture can spread across the internet in a matter of minutes, many families are sensitive about their privacy, particularly when it comes to their children. To protect your PTA from possible legal difficulty and to respect these sensitivities, it is recommended that you obtain a signed release form for pictures with children and for any photos you intend to use in advertising or in merchandise for sale. National PTA will not publish any photographs without a signed release form, and frankly, neither should you. To aid in the process of securing release forms, consider creating an annual form that families can sign that covers the entire school year. You should keep the signed release forms for the life of the photograph or video. It's important to know that your school's photo release form are not a replacement for PTA forms. The PTA photography and video release form is included in the handouts for this workshop. More of us are using social media to stay connected both personally and professionally. The type of information shared on social media can also provide fodder for phishing attacks and even identity theft. Next, we'll discuss some of the things you need to know in order to prevent viruses and hackers from gaining valuable information about you and your PTA. When you think of cybersecurity, you may think of everything that's connected to the internet. Many years ago, you may have received a computer virus but didn't know how it affected your computer. The only protection was to buy an antivirus program. Today we're going to discuss some of the things you need to know in order to prevent viruses and hackers from gaining valuable information about you and your PTA. You may have received an email or text message appearing to be from someone on your board, or that even has their actual email address or phone number, asking for some sort of financial transaction, but it wasn't actually from them. As a nonprofit association, PTA can be vulnerable to these types of cybercrimes at all levels. PTA leaders are most likely to receive these types of emails, especially if you are the president or treasurer. The goals of these emails are to gain access to your information, often for financial gain. There are two ways that they can do this. The first way is email phishing. Typically from fraudulent or spoofed email addresses, but appearing to come from legitimate sources, these kinds of emails usually direct you to a spoofed website or otherwise get you to divulge private information, such as a bank account information, or account passwords or a social security number, or even ask you to purchase gift cards. The perpetrators then use this private information to commit identity theft or trick you into sending money in some form. Malware or ransomware. Malware is a virus that installs itself on your computer system and can encrypt files, making them inaccessible, and sometimes demands ransom payment to decrypt them. Often this kind of malware is triggered by downloading files or clicking links from untrustworthy sources which appear to be legitimate. So let's take a look at the most common ways that this kind of fraud can occur. Spoofing, as it pertains to cybersecurity, is when someone or something pretends to be something else in an attempt to gain our confidence, gain access to our systems, steal data, steal money, or spread malware. This usually occurs when spammers gain access to another user's data and clones their contact list. From there, they can replicate any of the contact's email addresses or phone numbers and make it seem as though the source is legitimate. Fraudulent emails are designed to look like it's from someone you know and trust, possibly a friend, a coworker, family member, or company you do business with. This can happen when spammers have access to names, but are not able to access actual email accounts. Often you will see the person's name in the from line, but when you look at their email address, it won't be theirs, it'll be to something different. For example, the sender's name might be someone you know, but the email address is something like 1615168 at nosuchemailprovider.com. The most common type of spoofing is done through email. Similar to phishing scams, spoofing emails can be hard to detect. Typically, a sense of urgency is conveyed in the way the spoofing attacks are worded, which is often the reason why users react to them. The telltale signs of a spoofing email include incorrect grammar, poor spelling, badly written sentences or phrases, incorrect URLs that look correct until you hover over them to uncover the actual URL, and misspelled sender email addresses, in which the name of the sender, the domain, or both may be misspelled. These can be hard to recognize when viewed quickly and may, for instance, contain the number 1 instead of the letter I. If you receive an email from the address of someone you know, but you suspect it's not from that actual person, do not click on any of the links, do not forward the email to anyone, and don't reply to the email. Doing this just increases the likelihood that someone will click on the link or divulge financial information. Delete the email immediately. This is most likely email spoofing. If you receive an email from a fraudulent email address, please report it to your email provider immediately and delete the email. This process differs depending on your email provider. Though it is not possible to entirely prevent these things from happening, there are a few things you can do to protect yourself, your accounts, and your contacts. Use antivirus software on all your devices. Run regular software updates on your devices and advise your fellow PTA leaders to do the same. As we discussed earlier, use strong passwords and establish two-factor authentication whenever possible. Only use familiar and password-protected Wi-Fi connections. Do not use internet connections that are open to the public, including cafes, restaurants, food courts, airports, hotels, etc. Do not click any links or download any attachments in a suspicious email. If you know the sender, contact them by phone and verify that they meant to send you that specific email. And lastly, never share banking or financial information in an email or text. If you have any questions about the material presented in this workshop, our contact information is on this slide. Remember to follow First District PTA on social media and visit our website at pta1.org. Thank you for taking time to join us today, and thank you for your service to PTA and to all children.